So ever since I got to Portugal, I've been thinking about this a lot. How I learned Brazilian Portuguese instead of the Portuguese from Portugal. And I was thinking like it's normal on one hand, but on the other hand it's kind of messed up because like the original Portuguese comes from Portugal. So why didn't I learn that one, right? And by the way, while I do this video, we're going to be exploring this park in Porto, the city of Porto here in Portugal. I figured it would be more fun if I do this video in a nice little park in the middle of the city instead of in a hotel room or something like that. So this video is going to be helpful to anyone who's trying to, not only if you're trying to learn Portuguese, but if you're trying to learn a language and you have to choose between different dialects. So if that's relevant to you, this is going to be very helpful. And if you're just interested to hear my story, then you can stick around and listen to that, because it's also part of the process of me making my points and giving you that kind of value moving forward. So my personal story is that originally, backstory first, very important. I learned Spanish several years ago, and I learned Spanish from traveling in Latin America, right? So I already had that start from Mexico, Colombia, Peru. In Spanish, it didn't really matter so much the dialect. I was speaking with everyone, and it was a lot of fun. I eventually got to Brazil and realized that I don't know anything in Portuguese. So I communicated in what was like a portuñol, like a mix of Spanish and Portuguese. And check out this nice garden here. Hello. Congratulations. So I'm trying to make this video also while not pissing people off, because it's just kind of awkward to, vlog in crowded areas. But you got a happy, soon-to-be married couple taking wedding photos here in the garden. But anyways, back to my point. I was learning Spanish. I learned Spanish, and then I wanted to learn Portuguese. Well, at the time, I didn't actually want to learn Portuguese because I only stayed in Brazil for 2 weeks. But a couple years later, I decided that I want to learn Portuguese because I was going to do a semester abroad in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. And so then, the pandemic all of a sudden hit. The semester abroad got postponed to the next year, so I had to wait a whole other year until I can go. And then I was stuck at home during the pandemic. Thanks for ruining my vlog. There's all these roosters in the park too. Then, in the pandemic, I had to learn from home, basically. So I was like, how am I gonna learn Portuguese from home? Well, lucky enough, there's a thing called the internet that's pretty useful. I go onto the internet and I go on all these platforms to, learn languages, platforms like Italki, Tandem. At the time I was using Italki. And I noticed that like pretty much everyone who I wanted to practice with, I just wanted to practice Portuguese. Pretty much all the options were Brazilian people. There was like no Portuguese people, maybe 1 or 2 for every 50 Brazilian people. And it made me realize that my options were limited. If I wanted to learn the Portuguese dialect, it was going to be very hard. And also it was more relevant to learn the Brazilian dialect because I was going to go live in Brazil, right? So if you look at my personal story and you're trying to apply it to your situation, you have to think about these 2 things. What do you want? What's your preference? And what does the situation want? And what I mean by that, what does the situation want, is sometimes the dialect chooses us. We don't choose the dialect. So let's say you have a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend that speaks a certain dialect. You're probably going to end up speaking that dialect as opposed to another one. Or let's say you go online and that's your only means of learning the language, and there's just 80% of the people are from one specific dialect. You're probably going to end up learning that dialect. Now, of course, there are ways to fight that, right? So your personal preference is the most important. That's first priority. I can give you an example. From my experience learning Arabic online, I wanted to learn the Shami dialect. Whether it was Syrian, Lebanese, Jordanian, Palestinian, I wanted to learn that dialect of Arabic. But when I got online, I realized 80% of the people who want to practice with me are Moroccan. I was like, I don't want to learn Moroccan Arabic. I want to learn the Shami Arabic. So I really have to go out of my way to find those people and make them my loyal language partners, right? So that's kind of how I do things. I believe in learning a language by talking to people. Let's go this way because there's nothing interesting over there. So forgive me if I get a little ADD. I'm trying to navigate and talk to you at the same time. And for me, the most important thing is to communicate with the people that I want to communicate with and make friends. And so my language learning goals are directed in that way. So it really depends. This is a good point for you to think about right now. If you're watching this video trying to decide whether you should learn Brazilian Portuguese or Portugal Portuguese, then you really have to think about, what is your goal? Do you want to go live in Portugal? Do you want to go live in Brazil? Do you want to, you know, win a competition in conjugation of verbs? You know, you want to speak the most proper Portuguese? So then, if you want to speak the most proper Portuguese, the most correct one, if you want to be the best Portuguese speaker in the world, you should probably go down the route of learning Portuguese from Portugal. You know, if you want to speak Portuguese to speak to as many people as possible, you should probably learn the Brazilian Portuguese, right? And, but anyways, if you're going to learn Portuguese, don't worry, whichever decision you make, you'll be able to communicate with everyone. Of course, accents can get difficult depending on the region and the specific neighborhoods and, you know, whatever, but not to go into that too much. Just do what makes you happy. You know, do what sounds fun to you, right? This is your decision. So if you're going to make a decision, just go with it, right? Go with it. You're going to be able to learn either one. This is not, if you clicked on this video thinking like, oh, which one's going to be easier for me to learn? I can't answer that for you, because for me it was Brazil. And for someone else it's going to be the Portugal Portuguese. As a matter of fact, if we go down my route of having learned Spanish first, it would be easier to learn the Portuguese from Portugal on the base of Spanish. The Portuguese from Portugal, the way that they speak here in Portugal, is actually more similar to the way that I was speaking in Spanish, so it would have been an easier jump. Instead, I decided to go all the way over to the Brazilian Portuguese, which is totally different. All this slang, cutting the words, it's not like objectively the easier one, right? So take that into consideration when you're thinking about learning Portuguese. Check it out. We're in a forest, but I wanna get to the nice river views. We will get there. Stick around for the nice river views. You're gonna see Porto. It's a beautiful city. Another reason why I'm making this video right now is just because I was really enjoying the day in this park. I wanted to share it, and Porto right now is very crowded with a lot of tourists, so I feel like it would be good to get out of the tourist's way and take the time to give you this video, because I know it can be valuable to you, you know, especially if you're learning a language. Let's go. There's somebody here. There's somebody on the phone, so I don't want to piss him off. Anyway, where was I? Another thing, did I mention the music? I love Brazilian music. I love Brazilian music. I always have. Even before I started learning Portuguese, I really liked Brazilian music. I'd watch, you know, a couple Brazilian movies, I think. And so that's also something to take into consideration. Media is a very big tool for people to learn languages all over the world. You can go to third world countries and very poor countries, and you can find little kids who speak amazing English. Not because they were given the opportunity in school, as a matter of fact they weren't, but they learn English from watching TV shows and YouTube videos and playing video games online with strangers in other parts of the world. So media is such an important factor. So again, going back to the Portuguese example, you're less likely to come across a Portuguese movie or a Portuguese song. You're more likely to come across a Brazilian movie or a Brazilian song, just because there's a bigger Brazilian population than a Portuguese population, and therefore more media will be produced in the Brazilian world. That's just how I see it, right? So that's another thing to take into consideration. If you are trying to answer the question, you know, which one's going to be easier, it's not set in stone. Like I said, it's an easier jump to Portuguese than to Brazilian Portuguese, but in terms of, you know, what tools I have at my disposal, it was easier to learn Brazilian Portuguese. So that's the route that I took, and then you can apply it to your situation and decide what you want to do. Check out the view, guys. Wow. It's a nice view, eh?
Awesome, man. Best ever.
Where are you guys from?
Mallorca.
Mallorca? Yo estaba en Málaga en agosto, yeah, in Sevilla.
Sí, pero Mallorca es mejor, ¿eh?
No conozco.
No, bueno, pues deberías.
Entonces la próxima viaje voy a visitar.
Súper.
Disfruta, aprovecha.
Dale, igualmente.
So, yeah, nice people from Spain and other people here enjoying the view. Wow. really spectacular. So yeah, what else did I want to say? I hope until now that you've gotten a dose of value out of this, because really I see people who are trying to learn a language and they spend like 6 months just trying to decide which type of dialect they should learn. It's a freaking shame. You know, with those 6 months you could have even mastered the damn thing, or you would have been halfway there, right? And instead you were just thinking, oh, maybe I should learn the Moroccan Arabic, and maybe I should learn the, I don't know, the Lebanese Arabic. Just choose one. Choose one, right? And another important thing, I'm going to repeat myself because it's so important. Sometimes the situation chooses us. We don't choose the, you know, the dialect. It chooses us, right? So look at your life situation. Look at where you are geographically, who you can connect to on the internet, who your friends are, who your family is, and see what you have at your disposal. That's a very important thing. But what's even more important than that is if your will overpowers that. What I mean by that is if your will is to learn a different dialect, then you have to build, you know, that infrastructure for yourself. You have to build that atmosphere for yourself. So if I'm, you know, if I'm living in Florida and I'm surrounded by 30,000 Brazilians in my city, and I love Brazilian music, and I want to learn Portuguese, but I say, hey, I want to learn the Portuguese, then I'm going to have to do a lot of work to reposition myself and get into that optimal vibe to learn the Portuguese. Maybe I'll have to move to Portugal. Maybe I'll have to go on these platforms and just kind of pick out the you know, the handful of Portuguese people that are using them and befriend them and practice, right? So I'm only thinking about this more and more since I got to Portugal, because before getting here it was like a no-brainer. Obviously I'm learning Brazilian Portuguese, but now that I'm here, meeting Portuguese people and really connecting with them, and I love their vibe, I'm kind of like, you know, wow, it would have been awesome to meet you 3 years ago, and you know, maybe I would have been turned on to that dialect. Maybe I wanted to learn Portuguese, but that's why life situation and, you know, whatever position you're in is very important. That's gonna give you a boost in your progress, and you'll be able to master the language a lot faster. And now the last point that I'm gonna address, for everyone who thought that this was a Portuguese dialect takedown video, you know, I'm not here just promoting Brazilian Portuguese. I'm trying to make this video as neutral as possible, but I will say that I really love the Brazilian dialect just because of the way it varies and all of the slang, and it's been such a fun experience speaking Brazilian Portuguese. So I really can vouch for the Portuguese, for the Brazilian dialect, because just my experience has been incredible. So if anyone is here thinking like, you know, I want to know what Adam thinks I should learn and what the best one and what the most beautiful one, like, I will go with the Brazilian Portuguese, you know, all day. Yeah, I really wanted to give that dose of value to anyone who's out there learning a language, because I really love learning languages, and I think that it's a shame for people to waste time trying to debate, you know, which dialect they should learn or who they can practice with. Like, you gotta just jump in, just go for it, and I'm telling you, whatever you set your mind to, you're gonna learn it. Whether it's the Portugal Portuguese, the Brazil Portuguese, or any other language, you got it. Choose it, start learning it. My personal preference, do it with people. School's boring, and yeah, that's it for now, guys. I'm looking forward to the rest of this Portuguese adventure, and I hope you join me in the next videos. See you later.